There we go. All right, so welcome to another episode of Podcast Weekly. My name is Benjamin. We are live. Today is Saturday, July 4th, 2020, and it's yet another great day not to catch coronavirus, and I hope I can stop saying that someday, especially considering in the rise of coronavirus cases here in the Philippines, and it's disheartening to see my homeland being devastated as well. They're like increasing to like 50,000 new cases every day. It's insane. In addition to this program, Podcast Inc. also has a blog that is updated several times a week. Simply go to podcastinc.org to read the blog. There you can also donate to our organization. If you are willing and able to provide a donation, you can do so via patreon.com/podcastinc and become a supporter of our program. We don't have any call screeners today, so if you do call into the show via the link on the screen over here, wrong side, damn it, I'm going to get it wrong every time. There it is. You can... You can go there and I will accept your calls whether or not they're screened. Apparently today, that's what we're going to be doing. So we welcome you to call in and thank you for in advance for doing so. But if you don't want to call in today or you're not able to, you can email live@podcastinc.org. That goes to myself and some other people behind the scenes. We also have our co-host, John Joe, who is not on cam right now, but maybe he will be shortly. I don't know. However, I will say that today we're going to be discussing debating, and I think John has some opinions on what happened yesterday. I had a discussion with Eric Hernandez, and that was really fun. I actually really enjoyed that, and kind of wanted to get John's thoughts on that as well for the live audience to see what they think, or what you thought of it as somebody who was watching live from the other end. So, well, yeah, what did you think of that, John?
Yeah, well, first off, I thought it was very, very honest and very clean. It was a clean discussion. It's not like the usual ad hominem debates. And it was surprising that everybody kept their cool. Uh, Now, the one thing about the conversation that I did notice is because it's in a Filipino page. So people were asking or were commenting that you guys should, or the next speaker should be speaking in Tagalog. It's like,
Yeah.
guys, audience
Where are the
members,
Filipinos?
yeah, understandably, when you invite guests, it's not exactly gonna be, all Pinoy, all talk all the time, because it would be difficult to have a translator at the same time. I think that's something people have to
I agree.
realize. Like, it's a small complaint. It's like, oh, why are you guys complaining over what language? In fact, when it comes to science, it's very, very hard to translate to Tagalog. I
Right.
experienced this.
Yeah, we're gonna have to work on your
Experimental.
connection, John. We got to get you some better internet. I'm telling you,
Oh,
we got to get
yeah,
you better
definitely.
internet. I agree, though. I think it was just important enough that we got the message out to the Philippines rather than we necessarily need to have Filipinos. But I'm saying that as a non-Filipino, so maybe I have no right to talk. I don't know. What do you think about that one?
Well, that's why it was difficult. I was part of this experimental batch back in the 90s. They did algebra and trigonometry in
Mhm.
Tagalog all of a sudden. And that basically built our entire curriculum as far as I'm concerned. And I think it was the 90 or 95% drop in performance for everyone. Because all of a
Mhm.
sudden, from learning algebra, then all of a sudden you had to learn all these new terms you were unfamiliar with. And then
Right.
and a half later, they brought it back to English. They kind of
Right.
gave up on that idea because even the
So,
teachers had a hard time.
I liked the discussion. Me and Eric had a really good discussion. I think we're going to do a part 2 in August. We haven't quite decided, but I told him I think I want to be on the defensive. I want to defend a position and not just be, always putting the theist on the chopping block, even though that is fun to do. Because I think it's, I mean, I do have positions. Atheism isn't really a position that I hold. It's just a description of what I don't hold. But I
Mhm.
would say that I do have positions. I think science is the most reliable method of understanding reality. I think secular humanism is the best way to address morality, things like
Mhm.
that. So there are things that I can defend and that I hold to be mostly true. And so I think that's
Mhm.
something we talked about after the discussion was that I want to defend a position. I don't want to always, be on the no side or the con side or whatever you want to call it. But
Mhm.
so I'm looking forward to perhaps a part 2 with him on that one. And I think we're also, I haven't absolutely confirmed when we're going to do it, but we're going to have a few special guests on the show in the coming weeks, in the coming months, perhaps. Those people include Dave Warnock, who is like the dying out loud person. He has ALS. He was diagnosed with ALS like a year ago. He's a former preacher. And he is now like an outspoken atheist speaker. And I think he wrote a book called Dying Out Loud or something like that. I could be mistaken about that one. Um, and then we have Shannon Q. I'm trying to get her on the show. And we also have Dr. Daryl Ray, who I'm trying to get on the show. Both of them are very familiar with mental health and that kind of thing. And that's something that's very important to me. And we'd like to get some people to discuss mental health on the show because
Mhm.
we are lacking in that department here in the Philippines. That's something that a lot of
Definitely.
secular atheists just don't have access to, that in the same way that someone who's religious might have access to. So there is actually a group that was just announced, which most of you probably got the notification in the group, which is the PATAS mental health support group. So you can go check that out, and we will leave a link in the description on YouTube as well for that. And then there's I'm trying to see if I can also get sorry, the name is slipping my memory at the moment. Oh gosh. Oh, I wanted to get Anthony Magnabosco on the show and to talk about street epistemology And then I also wanted to do an interview with Matt Dillahunty. So I'm trying both of those guys as well to see if they'd be interested in talking with us. Talking with the
If you
likes of
get
our
Matt,
small
that
little
would be
stream.
crazy.
That would be fun. Yeah. And then, yeah, that was really funny last night. Actually, during the discussion, I was talking to Eric. He said, "Gosh, you really sound like a Matt Dillahunty pupil, you know, or something like that." And I said, "Yeah, that's pretty apt description. I mean, I have a little bit of that old school like Aaron Raw discussion type, and Richard Dawkins, and I'm influenced by a lot of different people. But Matt is definitely the one who makes things the simplest and easiest for my brain to grasp. So that's kind of why I always argue that way." Because that's just how he tends to think of things, is kind of how I tend to think of things. So it makes sense for me. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting. I think I'm demeanor.
Also the demeanor, yeah, or the way of speaking as well.
I think
It's
so.
not as aggressive.
I think I'm a little less aggressive than Matt is sometimes.
Oh yeah,
But that's
there's compilation of best stuff, getting pissed off.
Yeah, but that's fun. I think that's fun, and I like to do that sometimes too. But not just to be a dick to people, but like if they're going to come and bring their asshole behavior, I'm going to perhaps respond back in kind in some way. But anyway, another thing we're going to talk about today now is the INC, Iglesia ni Cristo. I tried to get the word out to them that we're talking about them so that they can see this and perhaps, we'll respond to some of what we have to say, or maybe we'll get somebody there, a representative, to actually talk to us. That would be interesting, but I really, really doubt that's going to happen. Do you think that's even possible? Like, for one of them to actually talk to us?
This is actually painting a target on this particular show, because one
fun
that's members is that they love to respond, they love to react right away. So I'm hoping we get that, but at the same time, I hope that our listeners or atheists learn something from this, because a lot of people are part of the church and they're making assumptions about it. It's all hearsay. So at least today, they'll be able to grasp what it's all about. Like, I remember a week or two ago when I brought it up, and then it's like, Ben, you have to hear, the stuff about this church. You have to read about what they've been up to, and that's why hopefully, I'm pretty sure that you've done your. And
I did look up some stuff. Yeah.
Even some of the moderators had comments as well, because it's kind of, I won't say they're like Scientology, but they are more often than not looked at by other religious people as
you're cutting out again, John. Your connection is awful today. It might be something to do with the weather, so let's not blame John entirely, but it's definitely his internet service. Maybe we can get you like a 4G box or something, and then just for our show, you can use that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be reporting on some of the stuff that I've seen and heard, including some of the stuff that was told to me today that I looked up a little bit extra just before the show. I'm not asserting that any of this is a fact. So if you are an INC member and want to sue me for slander against your ridiculous organization, you can, or maybe perhaps you want to send some secret organization to kidnap and kill me, simply for speaking my mind. Firstly, I thank you in advance for turning me into a martyr for atheism. And secondly, go fuck yourself. So these guys allegedly encourage block voting. I'm going to be using that word a lot. Just spoiler alert. So one of the things that they use to justify this idea of block voting, and maybe, John, do you want to expand on what block voting is before I go too deep into this? I mean, I know what it is.
Basically, putting all your votes in one candidate. So more often than not, in the presidential elections, that's what happens. And there's a lot of flirting. There's a lot of flirting, and once a political aspirant gets INC to back them, a lot of people say that's a sure win.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and
so it's a lot of power.
It is a lot of power. And the reason they do that is not just for the power. They actually cite a biblical substantiation for this, which we'll talk about. So 1 Corinthians 1:10 from the NIV, I appeal to you, brothers and sisters, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that all of you agree with one another in what you say, and that there be no divisions among you, but that you be perfectly united in mind and thought. So in other words, it's a hive mind. They want to have a hive mind type situation. That's what these religions are creating, is just one big hive mind. And whether or not that's entirely the motivation and it's not also motivated by power is really hard to say. But they do cite that as a biblical motivation for it. So I don't really want to assume what their motivations are, but they did cite that one on their own website and from other places as well. And then, of course, block voting is unconstitutional, and yet they think it's valid to use their power and belief system as a tool for ignoring this constitutional law, which is itself unconstitutional. So there's like two unconstitutional things going on. You have the block voting, which itself is unconstitutional, and then you have the fact that they're using their religion to justify it, which is also unconstitutional. So that's
and there's no way you can get around it if you're a member. I've mentioned in the past that I have friends who are INC, and despite what they believe or what their political stance is, they have no choice, which is in a way sad that they have to succumb to this, but that's the reality of their religion.
Yeah, I know.
It is unconstitutional.
And I would say that in principle, I'm not opposed to a group saying, if your ideology is this, these are some of the candidates who align with that ideology. I don't think I would necessarily say that's immoral or wrong or anything. I think it's just the idea of here are the people you need to go vote for is wrong, which is different. Those are two distinct things, in my opinion. On the one hand, you're saying these are the people that align with this ideology. Like these are the people who support pro-choice, for instance. And then, if you're a single issue voter and you don't want to support candidates who are anti-choice or pro-abortion or pro-death or pro-life. That's it. That's the one. Pro-life.
Pro-life.
Yeah. Sorry. I don't ever like to call it that anymore. I always call it anti-choice. So if you're like an anti-choice person, I don't want to vote for you. So here's a list of people who are not anti-choice, right? I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with that. It's just when you say that here's the people who you have to vote for because you're a member of this church, or that we strongly encourage you to go vote for, which is also immoral.
Yeah. If you don't vote for them, you'll get in trouble.
Yeah.
See, that's the thing.
You'll be reprimanded by the church, allegedly.
Oh, some lazy people will be like, oh, I don't have to watch the news. I don't have to read the agendas. I don't have to know what this person stands for because my church says to vote for this guy. So, okay, that's it. Doesn't matter what the person has done or what he plans to do and all that. When the church says vote for him, okay. As simple as that.
Exactly.
It's in a way, it's a little convenient for the ones that don't want to think.
Right.
And it's really. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say I think it's just discussing abuse of their power, and I don't ever want to. I would never want to paint this as a it's just a little thing. No, this is a big deal, and it can result like John said in the candidates winning and losing on the basis of churches telling people who to vote for, and that is deplorable to me because it just sets up a rigged system, which means that they either can't lose or won't lose very often, and it's not fair, and that's why it's unconstitutional, or why it was deemed unconstitutional.
It's kind of like that argument when looking for a job or applying for a company. It's not what you know, it's who you know, and sometimes
nepotism.
Those applicants, it's in a way it's like that, and it kind of sucks because sometimes you're working for someone who knows everyone on top, but they're ignoramuses when it comes to their work ethic or everything else that follows. It causes chaos, and you can't complain because they're friends with the bosses. That becomes a problem.
Yeah, I actually had, and I didn't even think of this at the time, but I think that the last job that I got, the one that actually got me here to the Philippines, was a result of nepotism. Now, I do think I was qualified for the job, but I don't think that I got it because of my qualifications. I think I got it because I knew the boss, which I didn't really consider at the time. I didn't really think about it. I was just excited to be able to travel to the Philippines and get a new job and, you know, spend time working on music and stuff. So it is something I'm against as well, though. I want to be picked because I'm the best person for the job, not because you like me or we know each other or we used to do stuff together. You know, that's not the reason I want to get the job. Because then it sets up a situation of resentment possibly down the line, which is kind of what ended up happening. Yeah. If I'm not actually good enough for the job or qualified, you know. So
that's why.
And then that same thing. Yeah.
Now. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Go ahead.
Yeah. Some companies have realized this problem within the workforce. And what they've done is you don't need to submit your age. It doesn't matter what gender you are. You don't even need to send a photo. You know, you let your credentials speak for you. And going back to, well, politics and elections, that's something I actually voiced out before. I don't need to see what the guy looks or the woman looks like. I don't need to know what their surname is. What I need to know is the platform that they're standing on and what laws they're pushing for. Then I can make a rational choice on basically what aligns with how I see a well-run government, you know? Because the thing is, it's all about image now. That's what happens with politics. It's who you know, it's not what you know. It's all about image. It's all about the surname. That's why we have political dynasties. But if they were all judged based on their actions, I think it would be a completely different story. The thing is, a lot of people, as I mentioned earlier, are lazy. So we have the shortcut of just seeing all these banners and posters and tarpaulins with people's faces.
And I don't know if you're aware of this, but if you do include a photo on your resume, if you're not perhaps someone that this person has a bias against, you can be up to like 4 to 5 times more likely to get picked over someone who didn't include one. So there you go. That's a fun fact for you, which is unfortunate, but it's a true fact of the way humans see faces. And I don't know. It's really weird. We're just pattern seeking face recognition machines. So, you know, it helps us get jobs, which is really strange.
There's a cool show on Netflix. I think it's called 100 Humans. And then they did that test. They got application forms. They put the person's faces, and then basically they asked other people to rank them, like what they are or what their jobs are and what their qualifications are, just based on what they look. And that test clearly demonstrates that people are biased.
Right. Yes, definitely we are. Yeah, we are always biased about something. I'm biased towards a lot of things I may not even realize sometimes. And I try to be biased towards things that are rational and reasonable and science-based and evidence-based. But sometimes I might not be. And when I recognize that bias, though, I try to correct it, unlike some people who probably just go with it. But, you know, like some presidents that I know of. But
yeah.
So back on INC, yeah. Let's go back to INC for a moment.
So in that situation, imagine that INC is somebody up in position in the office, and he's like, "Oh, HR guys, I think you should, you know, accept this candidate because you guys know me. You know, I have everybody loves me in the office, and I think that applicant A should be the one you choose. That's why." And that's what INC is doing in regards to politics.
Right. Well, allegedly doing. So I'm going to be using that word for today.
Not a secret. The country's been through it since ERA.
I'm not saying they're not doing it, but I'm also not saying they're doing it.
They are. Yeah. True. Okay, allegedly.
We're just asking questions, John. All right. So they allegedly have a death squad called SCAN, SCAN. They have it's called the Special Community Action Network. They are alleged to have killed 2 men by beheading and burning as far back as the mid-90s. Several people have gone missing or turned up dead for speaking out, allegedly, against them for attempting to infiltrate their facilities. I'm being somewhat humorous in this because I'll get to that. Anytime they feel persecuted or threatened, they tend to, or some of them, not all of them probably, but there's a group, this group tends to go and pursue these people. A quote from an article I read, which I won't cite because I'm not going to do your homework for you, INC. Multiple counts of abductions, illegal detentions, grave threats, acts of violence, and murders. They are now even boldly doing these publicly, even in broad daylight, simply because they know that they have the full backing of the EVM, end quote. So the EVM church. So that is that's just deplorable, disgusting, inhuman, if it's true. And yeah, I don't know. Some of this stuff was in tabloids magazines, which it makes it a little bit harder for me to trust the information. But at the same time, some of it was just from sort of like independent media, which I tend to think independent media is doing their best to relay the truth as best they can. But at the same time, I'm not as familiar with this stuff. I'm not like. I haven't gone out and done this research myself in the reality. I've just looked on the internet at information. So I don't know, have they actually done abductions? Have they actually illegally detained people? Now, I know of one instance where they did have someone detained, which was Ramon Tulfo, who was famously illegally detained for his comments against the church and then let go after like 6 hours. But yeah, I don't know how much of that is true. Like, have they actually done murders or beheadings or anything like that? Like, what do you know about this? Because I'm not up on the facts per se.
When it comes to the older articles, this is during the 70s and 80s. There were publications. We didn't have the internet back then, and there were publications about accusations against them in regards to the so-called murders. Now, what's funny is some of that information happens to just disappear after a certain amount of time. Now, in recent times, there was I wouldn't call it a hostage situation, but a lockdown situation where it was televised. And then after some inquiry, it was broadcasted in ABS, GMA, the usual networks. And then the issue just kind of died down. Now, when it comes to independent reporters, which I believe are the victims of the so-called murders in the past, is that they're the ones on the ground themselves. They're the ones that find these stories, the independent ones, and then it gets passed on and turns into bigger news. Then they make it to mainstream media. So the thing is, once it gets to the headlines, it's always covered because every day there's news. Every day there's horrible news. Every day there's something to report. Like we could be talking about politics today, and if a volcano blows up, the politics kind of gets erased because of the urgency of what's currently happening. So that's the problem with current affairs as well, is because news reporters will focus on the now. Rarely do they go back and kind of recycle all old news. See, that's why thank God. Thank God for the internet, because you can backtrack.
Everything lives forever on the internet. Even if it's deleted from the internet, the Wayback Machine, if you've never heard of that, is a good way to look at pages that used to be there that aren't anymore. So it actually stores internet pages on it's called the Wayback Machine. I think it's waybackmachine.com, but don't quote me on that, and please don't go there. It might be a virus. So or malware. I have no idea, but it's something like that. Google it. You can basically go to any website that used to exist or once existed, or even like old school YouTube. You can see what that used to look like. Like there's all kinds of stuff. And I think even some of the old PHILIPPINE websites are probably on there because it stores pretty much anything it attempts to crawl from Google gets stored at some point. So it's really fascinating. So yeah, once it's on the internet, it's probably on the internet forever somewhere. Somebody stored it. Somebody took a screenshot of it. Some server has it somewhere. And it's not going anywhere. So the days of the internet have made it a lot harder to hide information than it has ever been before in history. And that's unfortunate for people that want to hide information. Yeah.
So speaking of history, there's a saying that whoever wins the war gets to write history. So
Yes.
I also think that some of that is happening because clearly seen in the movie Felix Manalo, which you should watch. Honestly, Ben, you
Yeah,
should watch
I
this.
think you mentioned that.
It ranked. Yeah, I brought it up before. It ranks higher than Star Wars. That's how good a movie it is, as of IMDb's rating. It was actually, I think, a 9 out of 10 or almost a 10 out of 10 at some point. And it's a retelling of the story, the inception of the Iglesia, the church. And I actually have friends who work in the production.
Mhm.
And let's just say that there were no creative uh, there was no creative liberty at all. Everything was dictated and told, and it had to pass so much approval for them to launch this movie. And apparently, it's a hit. And I think you should see it
I will
because it's a
make a
humble.
concerted effort to do that, and maybe we'll talk about that next time. So,
Mhm.
yeah, that's a really good idea. I will check that. I can't really comment on it now, obviously, because I haven't seen it, but I will try to take a look at it.
But
Um,
it's in a way it's explaining how there it's so easy for them to rewrite history because they have the money, they have the power, they have the control over the, a film. It's easier to watch a film than to read a book. All you have to do is sit down, eat your popcorn, have your soda, and watch and take in what
it's
you're seeing.
also slightly less reliable, and I don't mean that as a broad brush to everything, but it depends on what you're watching. Like if I'm watching a nature show by David Attenborough on Netflix, I'm confident that I'm getting some really interesting, good information about nature that is probably accurate. You know, science stuff is usually going to
Mhm.
be easy to make films and stuff out of Brian Greene's work or the cosmos or whatever. But when it comes to
Mhm.
documentaries, you have to realize that you're getting the information from the mouth of the producer and the writer and the director, not getting it yourself from the different sources. So you're getting the information that they want you to take in to tell
Mhm.
a certain narrative. Now, I know some documentarians try to be very careful about making sure that the story that they're telling is as true and accurate as possible, as unbiased as possible. But again, you can't really remove all bias. And if there's like one thing that happens, there's this sort of visual storytelling that happens, and one thing that happens is music. Um, this music is so powerful, and when it comes to documentaries, and this is true for nature documentaries too, um, if they're trying to tell you something that they think is sad, let's say, and sad music is playing, then the documentary is telling you what to feel, which to me
Yeah.
creates a unfair bias for that particular thing. And that happens throughout different movies. Like it can make you feel angry, it can make you feel scared, and things like that. So just being aware of that is enough for me to say, yeah, I will watch it, but I will also make note of what I think I can take away from it without
Mhm.
overstepping rationality, I guess. So yeah, you have to be careful with that kind of thing. But I do agree that, I mean, if you said, you looked it up and they did all their homework and you checked the background of this movie and it's, this is based on fact and it's, you've looked at rebuttals or whatever, then that's fine. I'm okay with that. I'm just saying anybody watching any documentary should always take it with a grain of salt until they do their research properly afterwards too. That would be my
Mhm.
thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, but
Um,
this one isn't a documentary, see? It's meant for entertainment and educational purposes.
sure. Yeah. I
That's
was going to
what
say
we're
if
talking
it's,
about.
because I was looking at the film right now on Google, and it's not listed as a documentary. It's listed as
Mhm.
a drama, I think it is. Where is this? Yeah, it said
Yeah.
drama somewhere on here, which means it's not a documentary. But I was mostly giving just some thoughts on documentaries because I've seen a lot of them, and some of them tug at your heartstrings, and sometimes for good reason. Like there's this one that I saw, which was about the elderly and them losing their memories because of Alzheimer's, and there was some really sad moments in there, and the music was really sad, and it was fair. I thought it worked out pretty well. So it's not always a bad thing or anything like that. Anyway, so the reason I bring all this up and I laugh at it a little bit, even though it's disgusting, like the fact that they're killing people or illegally detaining people or threatening to sue people, it just reminds me of Scientology in the U.S. Um,
Yeah.
because Scientology is that same sort of I'm going to sue you, like that kind of thing. You talk bad about our religious group, I'm going to sue you. It's childish, it's stupid, it's ignorant, and I'm not a fan of that kind of idiocy. But it also makes me giggle because I always think of South Park whenever I think of that sort of behavior.
They do hold grudges, even if it's for comedic sake. For comedy's sake, they hold grudges. They take it very, very seriously, and well, that's what they're led to believe, diba? And the problem with these types of religions is that they're, I guess, new age. They've only come out of recent times, and they're versions. That's kind of like Mormon. When were the Mormons formed?
1864 or something like 1862, I think, something like that. Let me take you back to biblical times. 1862, I think. Mormonism, 1834. There you go. 1834.
Yeah, I forgot when INC was born. Was it 1641? I think it should. Well, it's also part of the documentary. Or
I have to look at it. Mormonism is not quite as bad as Scientology, though.
Mm-hmm. Well, because they're aliens in Scientology. That's another.
Fair enough.
That's another story. That's another episode.
Well, and a lot of them are lawyers. That's the thing. A lot of the Scientologists are lawyers, and that's where that kind of comes from. That idea, we're going to sue you, and they're rich. They have a lot of money. They take a ton of money from their members when they do their theta testing or whatever. And I presumably, allegedly, possibly, maybe, the INC does exactly the same thing. So I don't like 10% of their income, I think, is required.
10% of their income. That is a known fact. How they basically fund the church, and surprisingly, they opened up the Philippine arena. That's credit to the INC. That's their contribution to the country. That huge ass arena by NLEX.
Yeah, so it's like no, I have not, but we may. Yeah, so that's the thing. It's like it reminds me of the Catholic Church. It's like we don't know exactly how wealthy the Catholic Church is, or the INC, or whatever, but we do know some of the stuff that they own, and that can kind of give you an idea of just how wealthy they are if they're able to spend money on stuff like that. If they're able to buy a freaking arena, that's a pretty wealthy group.
Yep.
Like the church that I grew up in was Jacksonville, Florida, was a Southern Baptist church. Jacksonville's First Baptist Church, which I don't know that it was actually the first one, but that's what they called it. And it takes up, I think, 8, maybe 9 city blocks of downtown Jacksonville. And they have like a big old, like one of these buildings is just for kids, and it's got slides and, like little theme park rides and everything. It's huge. This place is huge. They have a lot of money. But we don't know how much money because they don't have to open up their books for the public to review. So they can make up whatever numbers they want or lie to you or just never tell you anything at all. But yeah, I don't know if that's the case here in the Philippines. Like, is that kind of the same idea, like where they don't have to open their books to the public? Oh, John, I think you muted yourself. You muted yourself. John, we lost you. Nope.
Sorry.
All right. No, you're all right. You're fine.
Yeah. I just had to mute it.
Okay.
Yep. I'm good.
Oh, so I was asking, is that similar here in the Philippines where the churches don't have to open up their books to the public for review, like most nonprofits might have to, or businesses? Like, is that kind of a thing? Because that's what happens in the U.S.
That's actually what happened. They were being INC was being audited at some point, and they went against it.
So they said they don't.
They defied the audit.
Yeah,
Because some people were complaining about funds, and the situation was rooted between members and family members of the heads. So that's why it became publicized, because even members didn't know who to side with. But in true Filipino fashion, majority sided with the older ones, the elders, rather than the younger ones. Because
It's
um, as far as what I gathered from all the information and all the reports, is that it was a power struggle.
it's probably fairly typical, I would think. I
It's
would think that's very
basically,
typical for people to side with the elders because though there's already name recognition there. It's kind of like why Joe Biden is the most, well, I'm saying this loosely, but the most electable candidate in the U.S. over, say, some new guy like Pete Buttigieg, who nobody's ever heard of. He's new to the playing field. He doesn't have a long track record of anything, and so of the two of them, Joe Biden just has more name recognition, it's another one of those things that I struggle with, and it's that human bias kind of thing where it's just, oh, I know this person better, even though they might be shitty on some level, they might have problems with their history. I know their name, I've seen their face, they were with another president at some point. He was a vice president of the United States for 8 years, so I'm going to vote for that guy. It's like, but what about his policies and all that? It's like we don't really think about that. It's a popularity contest, and that's true for basically anything that we engage in like that.
yeah, but when it
Well,
comes to this particular situation, is that the higher ups are all family members. That's the
right.
thing about INC. Like it's passed on from generation to generation. That's why it was what do you call it when pirates go against their captain? It's
Mutiny.
just a word for that. Yeah, it was basically a mutiny and basically calling it out. And now the situation's died down. So the problem with this particular church is that it's run by one family through and through.
Yeah.
There's you can't, no matter how good you are as a second in command or whatever, you will never be in that top position. It's guaranteed for the children's children. That's
And
their
that is a
legacy.
lot. Yeah, that is a lot of churches in the U.S. are the same way. It's just, the family owns the church kind of thing. Whether that be a local church or an international one or a national church, it's usually a family that owns the church. Um, and so it's different for different places. Sometimes it's not that way, but that is the case a lot of the times. So another thing
Mhm.
that I wanted to bring up was this anti-terror bill that was just signed into law. What do you think of that so far? Like, do you have any thoughts on the
Oh,
anti-terror bill?
yeah, I mentioned last week that I'm not particularly scared of the terror bill because first of all, what they're targeting is anti-communist propaganda.
Yeah,
It's the selling of weaponry, the selling of information. Um, a lot of people are just calling it what we did last week. You can easily be red tagged. If you say something that isn't in view of what the government wants, you can be tagged as a communist supporter. And at the same time, you can be imprisoned for about 14 days without any documentation. Basically, if you're suspected, you can just call anyone out. You can report that, hey, I think my neighbor is into some communist, activity. He looks like a communist, and you can be taken in for that reason. But I still believe in people, and I don't think people are that gullible just to believe all of a sudden that, yeah, this person is a communist supporter. And it's funny
and what
because
if like me, for instance, I consider myself a social democrat, and that borrows a lot from communism. Somebody could argue that I have views that are consistent with communism, such as to each according to his ability, whatever, that kind of thing. So is that the kind of thing the government here would say, oh, you are a supporter of communism because you support that sort of redistribution of wealth to the less favored or the less well off?
no, see, that's the thing. It's kind of like Bernie Sanders balancing out
Right.
all finances and stuff like that. Checks and balances, especially with the rich. But I don't think it's that. It's more of the people who protest, the people who do the effigies and burn them
Sure.
and use communist symbolism to basically mock the government. I think that's who they're going to be going after, not people who post on Facebook. honestly. Like a lot of people think that what they're going to be posting on Facebook is going to be called out. I highly doubt that because they're going to have to decipher a joke and opinion because everyone's allowed to still have their opinions. In fact, the our supreme leader says it himself that there's no reason to
Supreme leader.
fear if yeah there's no reason to fear because at the same time his best friends are communist China. you
Right.
know
So
it's and
hypothetical.
by the way,
You
there are
said
15 days
okay, go
before
ahead.
it's enacted into law. So we have 15 days to start knocking on people's doors, so especially if people know politicians and people in power or people who have a voice, who have an audience, then now's the time to voice out. So they're going to be talking about it for the next 15 days before it actually becomes law. That's why Duterte signing it, everyone's like, "Oh, you can't talk shit about the government." Of course you still can. There's no problem with that. And especially in the next 15 days, the important next 2 weeks.
So what if, because you said Facebook posts wouldn't be taken into consideration, but what if I posted a video of me like holding a hammer and sickle and just like, down with the stupid ideas of, the government doing X, and, like, is that the kind of thing that they're going to be against here?
See, but the thing is, when you label it as satire,
Not that I'm going to do that,
or
but
if you present it as ridiculous as a comedy sketch or even a TV show can make jokes about it, there
right.
won't be any problems with that because it's making fun of current events. But if you start posting links to support or to fund or to enable particular people who are being watched over, then it becomes a problem because that's who they're after. They're after the ones who are a bit militant.
Okay.
And
That's kind of what I
sadly,
figured when I read
they
about
think
it. I
that
just wasn't sure.
Mhm. It's, a
So
lot of
my,
people are scared.
okay.
And we got a caller last week about if I'm an atheist, am I gonna get tagged? It's like, no, of course not.
No, probably
You won't
not.
be tagged because you're an atheist. It depends on what you say and what you do. Because at the end of the day, somebody has to report you. First off, the reporting system here in the Philippines is ridiculous. Whenever something bad happens in social media, people will post in the comment section the isumbong mo kay Tulfo or Tulfo Action News or whatever. They turn to the side of the vigilantes who will make this into a big trial by media. And I
Right.
think that's the danger of it, is because a lot of power has been given to these blogs and these shows. So that's what I'd be afraid of, is getting tagged and put on one of these shows. Because then you'll
Yeah.
get the government's attention.
Yeah, I think I don't think there's anything wrong with someone espousing some communist ideologies, because there's not, I mean, for me, every version of some form of government has good things and bad things associated with it. I think that it's too easy to just say, oh, communism is bad. And I think that's too simplified for any position that I could ever take. I'm of the opinion that there's so much nuance to all of this. To just say, oh, you're a communist, so you're bad, or just, oh, you support this communist ideology, so you're bad. But like, well, what about the ideology is bad? What about, redistribution of wealth is a bad idea? It helps everybody. A high tide raises all boats. So it's that kind of thing that I would have to ask. Not you per se, but I'm just asking in general to the community. Is it really wrong to say, I support some aspects of communism, I support some aspects of socialism, I support some aspects of capitalism, I support some aspects of democracy and republic? I'm a fan of a lot of different things from a lot of different forms of government. And just to say, oh, you support communism, that's a problem. And then if you end up wrongfully accused of being associated with perhaps militant people because you support this, then there might be a danger in you getting flagged when you're not actually militant about it.
Yeah.
And so
Well,
it's
like
sort of
imagine a class
who
in
watches the
political
watchers.
science which has to discuss communism.
Yeah.
And sometimes when people learn stuff in school, oddly enough, people do learn stuff in school. they'll post it on Facebook, or they'll talk about it publicly. It's like, I learned this.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you support the idea. It's that you want to discuss the idea further and, you know, weigh the pros and the cons. Because
Yeah.
it's still worth discussing. That's what people are afraid of. It's like now we're being quote unquote silenced. Some topics are going to be taboo,
Yeah. So, like,
which
for
is hard.
example, I can give a really good example of this. Like right now, the Chinese government is shitty for a lot of really good reasons, in my opinion. However, the one thing they're really, really good at is doing stuff fast because nobody's got any oversight on them. So they can just build a hospital in like a day or a week or whatever. And, that take care of the coronavirus, get that shit knocked out. But they're also covering up a lot of information. So there's some give and take there. And so it's the sort of thing where like I can't just say everything about it is bad. Like a democracy in the U.S., for example, the Democratic Republic of the U.S., it's really slow to take action on things because there's so much overhead. There's so much cross checks and balances that it slows down the processes. So any serious emergencies can take a really long time to get taken care of effectively. And that's kind of, and I'm not saying that I support that aspect per se. I'm just giving an example of an example of something that I would say is a benefit to a communist government versus a democratic government, for example. But then there's also
Did you see
a
the
double-edged
news?
sword there. But which part?
There's a news article that's being shared around today from CNN.
Oh,
Anyone who talks shit about communist Beijing or anything against the government can be flagged and arrested when visiting Hong Kong, even non-Chinese. Did you hear about
hmm.
that?
No, but
That just came out.
fuck
It's
them. How about
circulating on
that?
social media.
Fuck them. So clip
See,
that out, spread it around, fuck them, and then when I go to China, make me into a martyr. So let's do that. Um,
that's why people are afraid of the terror bill, because it's adopting some practices which could be looked at as communism in the
yeah.
guise of a democracy. That's
So
why
we talked
this
a
law
lot.
it's being challenged. It's going to be
Yeah.
challenged, and I believe we aren't going to that path that people fear the most, because that's why we already know who signed it. We already know the
Right.
president also co-signed it. There are only two representatives who said no. So take their names down, ladies and gentlemen, and you can find all the information. And it's just weird that there is fear now that, of course, coronavirus is happening and all these ridiculous sidelines are being pushed when the focus
Sure.
should be on recovery. So that
Right.
also brings another aspect, which is the emotional aspect, that people are pissed, but they're not reading through the document. They're not going through it. That's why I know some people might have gotten the wrong interpretation when I said last week that as a media practitioner, I'm not that fearful yet. I don't have reason to fear it per se, because it has to be clearly nitpicked. And that's why people are scared now. They want to get off Facebook. It's like, all right, get off Facebook because of the memes. But, you got to be able to do your research. It's fear mongering. It's kind of
Yeah.
like religion.
But you do have to wonder, though, at the same time, who watches the watchers, and that's one of the things that always concerns me with bills like this, because the government's going to be the one that gets to dictate what is and isn't considered militant. They're going to be the ones that get to dictate what is and isn't okay to say. So it's like you have to always ask yourself who watches the watchers, and there needs to be some checks and balance there. And I think there is some in there. Obviously, it's not just anybody's guess, but I think you
Yeah.
get my point there. However, the reason I
But
brought up the anti-terror bill, I wanted to ask
Mhm.
you. Let's say hypothetically it was signed into law. It's done. It's in, right? Do you think INC could be flagged as a terrorist organization under this law?
Hmm.
That's why I brought it
That
up
okay.
because I wanted to know.
When it, when it comes to terrorism, it's using your religious power or your
Mm-hmm.
religion to basically terrorize and get your political agenda. Okay. Well, my loose definition of terrorism was always about, or religious terrorism is using religion to get a foothold on politics. And hmm, it could
I
be,
wouldn't
but I
only
really
say
don't think
religion, but
so.
yeah.
I wouldn't think so because just like religion here, well, when it was Cory Aquino and EDSA and the church was behind her and all that, and the uprising and the bringing down of Marcos, the church was a very, very big arm in that particular uprising. And of course, nobody thought it was bad because the church was speaking of, well, speaks on behalf of everyone's morals at
Right.
the time. Majority of Filipinos were Christian or
Right.
Catholic. That is a tough
S-
situation because they can always, I guess, beg the question or beg the argument of separation of church and state, that religion will always be what it is. It's separate from government. You know how, now
Yeah.
religion likes to meddle in politics, but the time that religion's put on a microscope, they're going to just claim that, oh, this is completely different from politics. This is all about faith. They can always use
Right.
that escape button.
They
I don't
they
know. That's how I
could,
see it.
but then
Yeah.
I guess the
There's
question
always a cop
becomes
out.
like, and I'm not saying they would necessarily get flagged as that, but I'm saying under the definition that they provide for what qualifies as terror and what qualifies as whatever or militant, like it sounds to me, at least based on what I've read about INC, that they could potentially fall under that umbrella. But then I have another question, which is more related to, say, because it talks about groups. It specifically talks about being associated with terror groups, and it can label
True.
groups as terrorists. So
Mhm.
hypothetically, just just hypothetical, um, the leader of our group, Richard, who sorry, Richard, I'm about to I'm about to use you in a very bad example, but here we go. And he's not watching now, so it makes it more fun when he watches it later. Uh, so let's say that Richard goes out and starts doing crazy, just militant communist behavior that none of us agree with. But then because he's the leader of PATAS, the entire group of PATAS gets labeled as a terrorist organization, and anybody associated with it falls with it, like me, who has nothing to do with anything Richard did or thought.
Uh-huh.
There's that danger, in my opinion, and that worries
Oh,
me
you
a little
mean
bit. You
guilty
know,
by association?
yeah, guilt by association. That's exactly what it is.
Hmm.
Um,
It
because
could
like just
be,
because I'm a
but
part
I
of a
think
group, you know,
they still have to basically make a case. They can't just see. That's the thing. I understand why people are worried because
mhm.
these cases will be dissected by the lower governments, the barangay tanods, the people who are, I wouldn't say ignorant, but um, not as knowledgeable about um, just the way the law works. It's because there are lynch mobs. You see it all the
Yes,
time. You see lynch mobs all the time, even a quote unquote a civil society. People still take the law into their own hands, and that's why it's scary. That's why the law is not scary. It's the people who will be enacting it who are scary because you're giving it to,
yeah,
like, not all of them
and it,
have access to educational books or even a proper procedure. A lot of procedure is not being followed, and that's what's scary. Even the ECQ, GCQ checkpoints and all that, every city has a different officer. Every city has a different checkpoint. Those checkpoints rotate, and everyone's still confused of what the law is really. And like now, I still see people not wearing masks, and I see guards ignoring them and letting them into facilities and all this because they
yeah.
know them. Oh, they're trusted people. You leave it up to people's biases. It's not clear cut. And maybe that's really the root of the fear, is that people don't trust other people, rightfully so.
Yeah, I don't think.
And that's
Yeah,
the
I agree.
problem.
I don't think there's really any way to resolve that, though, either. I think, well, maybe, but see, and I think you'd agree that the law is just an idea. It's all about the ability to enforce it and getting people to agree to enforce it. It's almost like money. Money is just an idea. It doesn't really exist as a thing unless we all agree it has value. I think the same is true for the law. The law is just an idea until it's enforced. I don't have rights until somebody defends my rights or I defend my rights. I don't, you know, the law against me murdering somebody, for example, isn't protected if there's nobody there to stop me from doing the murder or punish me afterwards. So it's just an idea until it's enforceable or enforced by some entity. And so that's kind of, I think, what you were alluding to there is that there's this inherent idea of anti-terror bill. And then there's this idea of having checkpoints, but having the people there that know people and just let them through without having to do it, or just broad brushly ignore, like, let's say INC should be labeled a terror organization. I'm not saying they should, but let's say they should, hypothetically, but they don't, because they have so much influence with the government that they can stop that from happening, that they can prevent their name from being tarnished because they already have infiltrated the government. I'm not saying they have, but hypothetically. So
yeah, and it's really the influence, whether it's the influence of power, of knowing someone, or the influence of cash. Even to defend yourself, if you are taken in by the quote unquote terror law, you're going to be detained for 14 days. And that's also 14 days of no salary, 14 days of the fuck am I going to do in here? Getting a lawyer and fighting that is going to be a bitch. That's why people are being very worried, especially, well, the educated ones, because they're still arguing about it. It's like, oh, I can't have any free thought. It's like, it's not about you guys. It's about the people who can't afford lawyers. In fact, that's what makes it scary. That's what people are forgetting. Because on social media, you're seeing class CBA. You're not seeing the C and D, the ones who are actually, I guess, ignorant of this particular law and where the boundaries are, because those boundaries are drawn. Those lines are drawn by local government, or that's why down to the barangay tanods. Because that's why if I don't like someone, I can always just collect some stuff that they posted on Facebook and report them and say that, oh, this guy's a dick and I'm pretty sure he's a communist. Here, look at his Facebook post. Look, he even has jokes about Marxism and, Hitler and whatever. And some people might even think that, Hitler is communist. That's how uneducated a lot of our countrymen are, and that's what's scary. They can't tell the difference.
Yeah, I was gonna say Hitler wasn't a communist.
When they look at students who rally, they red tag them as communists right away, as if rallying or speaking up or just marching becomes already anti-government. It's not. It's standing up for an idea, for an ideal, for something. So it's a way to be heard, but other people will look at it as propaganda, anti-government propaganda. It's like, you guys shouldn't be rallying. You should just follow the law, period. Stop being idiots. Stop doing what you're doing. It's pointless. You guys are anti-government. You should all be arrested. A lot of people have that mindset, which is very sad. It's like, if there's a problem, kill it. If there's a problem, arrest it. If there's a problem, get rid of it. That's why it's very tribal. And that's not how a democracy works.
Yeah, I agree. It's I don't know. I don't want to get too political, but I know we're talking about political things, so it's difficult not to. But whatever I support is irrelevant. The point is that we're just talking about the ideas here, and hopefully people understand the distinction there. But
yeah, exactly. It's a completely different thing. We're just talking about it like in the broad way.
Because I am representing Patas, and Patas doesn't have a particular political stance except for separation of church and state, and supporting education and that kind of thing. So that's really all we're about here. But
at the same time, we are a minority, and it's the government's job It
We
is
are.
in the Constitution to protect minorities. Like when we're
Yes.
getting ganged up on by the religious, we are the losing party to begin with. We are
Yeah.
the minority. There's no such thing as a majority vote when it comes to our particular sect or our particular religion, you know?
Yes.
So we are, under the Constitution, we are one of those who should be protected by the law. I don't know if some
Yeah.
people know that, but we are. We have that right.
Yeah, it's to protect the whole point of the Constitution, at least in the U.S., is to protect the minority from the whim of the majority. That's the whole idea.
Mhm.
Is that the
Oh, don't
majority
worry.
can't
We
just
we
impose its rule on us.
Yeah, we photocopied the US Constitution and applied it to the
I
Philippines. In fact,
I
for the
figured.
longest time, there was, oh my goodness, I can't remember the article, but there was an article in the Constitution that you had to put salt in your driveway to melt the snow. And that was in the Philippine Constitution.
Oh, that's really funny.
If,
Uh,
yeah. Oh, it's gone now. Don't worry. I think they got rid of it in the late 80s, early 90s, but yeah, it
Yeah,
was
these
obviously
the U.S. Constitution is a great constitution. I think it's a great idea, but the thing is not on itself enough. You have to be able to interpret it and enforce it. And right now, even in the U.S., we're seeing just a dismantling of the Constitution. It's just, for example, just recently, North Carolina, one of the states in the U.S., the one of the cities there imposed a law to not allow protests unless you get a permit. However, they also said they won't be giving out any permits right now. So they basically, without actually saying it, have completely banned protesting, which, of course, in my opinion, and maybe you'd agree, a mafia government should be protested. So, and
yeah,
that is what that is. That is a mafia government. So,
yeah.
yeah,
That's
I'm
why.
against that. If you need permission to protest, it's not a right. That's it's you know anyway.
Yeah, because it's still gonna pass through paperwork, and there's gonna be, at the end of the day, someone who decides. And if that
Mhm.
person deciding is not on your side, then that's it.
Yeah,
If he's the
you
one
better
you're
hope that
fighting against,
they're yeah.
or speaking out against, oh, yeah,
Yeah,
it
you
becomes
better
an
damn well
automatic
hope that they're open minded. And
You'd
that's
be
where I
lucky
hate
if
that.
you're open-minded. Because
That's where I hate that
nobody
idea.
wants to rock the boat.
No,
Nobody wants to rock the boat, man. That's why it's very, very scary times right now. Because now the fear is when you rock the boat, you can get arrested. And I will wait. I will wait the 2 weeks. I'm monitoring it. I'm following people who are speaking out. There are going to be public talks. And I think this weekend, there's already a bunch planned. So we'll be able to hear. And we'll see if senators, congressmen, and our representatives who we've elected speak up. You know,
I'm
people are
somewhere
scared
on
to
the
speak
fence
up.
about it. I'm somewhere on the fence about this one because on the one hand, I am against terrorism, but at the same time, there's
Mhm.
just a lot of vague language in there that leaves it up to the interpretation of whoever happens to be enforcing it. And that's where I think that they've done a
Exactly. Yeah.
disservice because I have read some of the anti-terror bill, not all of it, but I did read some of it. And then even read some of the interpretations by like CNN or whatever, which CNN, by the way, is not perfect, but they have a really good track record for good information. So I
Mhm.
look at it and I say they probably did the best to give their best interpretation of this anti-terror bill, and it seemed reasonable from what I read about it. But at the same time, maybe there's that vague language again that just makes it, what is considered militant, what is considered, is it militant? I'm a militant atheist? You could say that. Does that make me a terrorist?
Mhm.
So it's really it's just not well defined, and I think that's why it
Yeah.
probably should
Yeah.
go back to the drawing board to be better defined if they're
Mhm.
going to implement it at all. Um,
And
but
that's
yeah,
exactly it. It's not defined, and at the same time, that's why it's so easy to label anyone. It's so easy, and that's the problem. I think that's the crux of the problem, is that anyone can be labeled anything. Like,
Yeah.
for example, we're atheists. We don't believe in God. We don't subscribe to it. But other people will say, "Oh, you're Satanists." Instantly, you're Satanists, or you're anti-God. It's like, no, we're not anti-God because we don't believe in it. How can we be anti something we don't believe in? It doesn't even exist in our vocabulary.
I don't know. I mean,
People will be the ones labeling it.
I guess to play theist advocate a little bit, um, I'm anti Voldemort, so, and I don't think he
Yeah.
exists. But at the same time, I'm not anti Voldemort in the sense that I think he's real and I am out there opposing Voldemort. I'm just when I'm watching the movie or reading the book, I'm like, God, fuck that guy. That's so if the
Mhm.
God is real and he is actually existing, I think he's a piece of shit, and I am anti that God, but I'm not anti God in the same way that they're trying to say, where I think that this God is real and I'm opposing it. That would
Yeah.
be where I agree with you. Um,
That's why we
so
always ask which God when they're like, "Oh, you guys are insulting my God," and then we have to ask which one. And then if they
it's
said,
funny.
"Oh, you're anti my Christian God," it's like, "No, I'm anti every other else's God, but not yours." I
I
never
had I
said
had
I was.
somebody. I don't know if you
You
saw
know,
the post, but
and you
there's,
can.
and I'm not gonna say who it was, but somebody posted
Mhm.
about saying that they're agnostic and that they wouldn't adopt the label atheist because it's, atheism is this thing where you're always arguing with theists, and atheism is this thing where which God do you not believe in? It's like, it doesn't matter. You don't believe in any of them. That's what atheism is, and atheism doesn't
Mhm.
mean that you're always arguing with theists. But they were tacking all this stuff onto atheism that just isn't there. And it's like, well, I found peace as an agnostic. Well, I found peace as an atheist. Fuck you. So it's like, I don't get why you need to try to put stuff into this neat little box like this and add a whole bunch of stuff to the box that wasn't there to begin with. And that's what people seem to do, like you're talking about, calling us Satanists or whatever. But even from our own camp, people who don't believe in God still don't get it. Um, Atheism
Mhm.
is just the
Yeah.
lack of belief in a God. That's it. Everything else is added to it. Um,
Yeah.
so so, like, for example, this anti-terror bill with the INC possibly being under definition of terror, an atheist could potentially be under that definition, and then the entire atheist group would have to get labeled as a terrorist organization. That's how vague this language is. Um, it's like,
Mm.
because
I see that. I see
like,
your point there. Yeah.
like if I'm a militant
That's
atheist
possible.
going out and being a dick, and I say, well, I'm a militant atheist and I'm going out and hurting people, I'm not going to do that. But if someone else does, that suddenly militant atheism becomes labeled as a terrorist group, and then I can no longer adopt that label, or I could be arrested. So, and I'm not saying that's likely to happen or that it will happen, but just that possibility exists with the loose language that you're talking about too, that we seem to agree exists. So,
Yeah, and every group has its bad apple.
yeah,
You really can't avoid that.
right.
There are assholes in every group, even in Christian groups, even in even priests, even nuns. There's always going to be that one or two or three bad apples that will basically drag the entire organization. So maybe at this point, what we have to figure out, even our leaders for the small groups and stuff, is to figure out the way to behave accordingly. Because, as you said, the law is vague. So we do have to kind of tread lightly out of respect for our followers and the organization as a whole, as leaders, okay? But as individuals, you can do whatever the fuck you want. Okay, you're in charge of
Yeah.
your own lives. No one's telling you what to do. Like, I imagine maybe in Patas, maybe uh, maybe in 2 weeks, maybe there'll be a set of new rules that, oh, this page does not condone so and so, and it's just playing by the rules of the game, which are being set right now. They're
So
not yet
this,
set in stone, but they're slowly being put into place. So we also have to have that foresight to kind of protect our community. I think that's what's going to be
yes.
happening. Like families, parents will be telling their children, okay, son, I know you're like this, like that, but let's try avoiding, posting dick pics, because at the end of the day, if you get caught posting dick pics, our names will be in the newspaper beside you. Our family name's going to be put there, not just yours. So yeah, that's my
And
dick pic analogy.
if you need a real world contextual example also of this anti-terror thing, in the U.S. just recently too, this happened with the riots. We talked about the riots a little bit when that started happening. Um, the riots were mostly being instigated by Antifa, which is an anti-fascist group, but it wasn't all of Antifa. It was specific sects of people who are anti-fascists who happened to be terroristic. However, the government decided to label anybody who associates with Antifa as a terrorist. So that's exactly the kind of problem that I'm talking about here. It's like, yeah, but I'm anti-fascist. I'm an Antifa under that same definition that they are. I just don't go out and, destroy buildings and burn cars to the ground. I'm not doing that. I'm not interested in doing that. I'm just against fascism, which is not something that's wrong, but I associate with that label. So it's difficult for me to conceivably think of a way in which, unless I'm part of a group that has like a declaration of here are the things that we do, I don't think that group should be labeled as anything, because like, for example, Patas Inc., for example, only has here's the things that we're for, which is like the separation of church and state, right? Or separation of religion and government, whatever. That is all that should matter and all that should ever be taken into consideration when we're talking about this, because it doesn't matter what Richard goes out and does. If he goes out, sorry, Richard, it doesn't matter if he goes out and starts attacking babies. That's not one of our bylaws or a code of anything that we do. And I would speak out against it. And I would say that doesn't represent me as an atheist, that kind of thing. So it's, and unless the group specifically has a constitution of some kind, or this is what we represent, and those things happen to align with terrorist activities, I don't think that we should be labeling groups as terrorist organizations just on the basis of associating with the name of that group. That just seems like a really dangerous precedent to me. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Those are my thoughts.
Here. We have a comment here from Ken, from Ken Arn. Ken says, "I'm not afraid of this bill because I'm not a terrorist." That's the thing. That's the thing. Okay. That's why people are scared, Ken, is that you can be labeled as one even if you're not. That's the problem. Imagine being a poli-sci professor or any politics somebody who just discusses politics and government. If you're seen posting stuff about how communism is an effective way of answering so-and-so problem, or you're discussing Marxism, or you're discussing communist China, and just you're doing a term paper on it, you could get tagged. It's not terrorism per se. It could be anything that causes fear or terror. That's why it's that vague that you could get tagged. And
even the word terrorism is vague.
I don't think news publications or satirical posts or networks will get tagged by this necessarily, not unless it really goes against the government. But it's very easy to say I'm not a terrorist, therefore I shouldn't be afraid. That's the thing. Even the extrajudicial killings, a lot of those people weren't drug dealers. Also, you could argue that a lot of people who are, in fact, some people who are convicted, some people who are in prison, are not exactly in there for the right reasons. There is a number that will support how many people still fight for their innocence, basically. And yet they don't have proper representation in the courts. Therefore, they fall through the system. They get tagged as guilty because, some of them couldn't have afforded a better lawyer. They didn't have enough money to fight or go through the process. That's the part where it's scary. It's very easy to say, like, I can say that I'm not a terrorist, but if somebody really dislikes me and does the research and finds the stuff and just complains and says, "Oh, this guy keeps complaining. Look at all his programs. He keeps complaining about the government. Therefore, he must be
a threat to the government. He has
Yeah,
nothing
but
nice to say. Therefore,
yeah, there's also
he is the enemy.
exactly, and there's also this idea that the person who is the terrorist is probably the least qualified to determine if they're a terrorist or not. So, um, I don't think that you're
that's true
a
too. Yeah,
terrorist
a
necessarily,
lot of
but
terrorists say they're not
yeah.
terrorists.
I'm pretty sure a lot of terrorists don't think that they're terrorists. Yeah, I think that they think that they're doing the Lord's work, or representing a vision of some kind, or whatever. I don't think that they think of themselves as terrorists. So it's very easy for everyone to say I'm not a terrorist, even if they are.
Mm-hmm.
It's I don't know.
You can
It's
even
something
argue
funny there.
psychological terrorists. People who gaslight
Yeah.
their spouses or their friends and stuff like that. They could be that's a mental war. There are nukes. There are nukes that hurt feelings. There articulations or sentences or truths that will be denied by the person it's being thrown at, and they're gonna claim that they're hurt. Just look what happened to Carlos Celdran, who did his whole Damaso thing, and the only thing that the church could file against him was hurting their feelings. So they basically made him a religious terrorist, and he hurt their feelings. Therefore, he should be punished and imprisoned for hurting their feelings. So
Oh,
that's
they
why
got their
it's
feelings hurt. Poor fuckers.
yeah.
Mm. Oh no. Yeah. I don't care if I hurt their feelings. I don't care if the INC gets their feelings hurt by me. I don't care if I hurt the feelings of any church or anybody of any belief, because offense is not taken. It's or not given. It's taken. So it's I think that's something you say all the time too.
And I always say that, and at the same time, I remind my theist friends, I don't
Right.
attack you as a person. In fact, well, they hate hearing that I pity you because you're part of the indoctrinated. But at the end of the day, I'm not against you. I'm against the belief system. I'm against the idea of religion. Like, we're still friends. You're religious. You're still my friend. I don't agree with what you believe in. I think what you believe in is ridiculous, but I love you as a person. It's two completely different things, you know?
Yeah.
And some theists do understand that. That's why it's like, I'm not mad at you as a person. You're a very nice person. You're a kind person. You're a generous person. But your belief system, and especially whatever God they do believe in or whatever order, as long as it doesn't meddle with my life, then it's no problem.
Right.
You can do whatever you want. You can believe in the elves that live in your shoes, but yeah, just keep it away from my life. And that's what friends are. We don't enforce each other's rules on each other. There was one comment here. It's by Makisig. He says, with his limited experience with Iglesia ni Cristo debates, they do prefer to do it in their turf, like in their church or something, or their venue. He's been invited to one, and they were really keen on converting instead of discussing. That is my experience as well with born-again Christian groups, is that they would like to turn it into a spectacle where I guess they assume that they will do a throwdown on an atheist because they're going to do the majority vote. When it's done in their turf, of course, the applause will be reserved for them. The boos will be reserved for the atheists. And this has happened to a lot of friends. They've gotten caught in that trap where they're like, all right, I'm not scared. I will debate you. And then what happens is they're talked over. They will talk in a normal tone, but of course, whoever is defending the church will be speaking in this high tone and condescending manner. And of course, it gets the applause of the congregation because it's home court advantage. It's not a
Yeah.
level playing field for discussion. It's
And
a
I gotta
trap.
say, if
And I hope
anybody from INC invited me to go do that, I would still do it, even though I know that. So it doesn't really bother me at all. You can talk over me. I could probably talk over you too. So not only that, I don't give a shit if everybody's clapping for you because it doesn't make you right. It doesn't mean that your beliefs are true. It doesn't mean that you've won anything. You didn't win. It's just a hive mind, and I expect that for the most part. So if I were to do such a debate or be invited to that, I would totally not be bothered by that hardly at all. So
There's a famous I forgot his name. Oh my goodness. There's a famous Muslim religious speaker who does that. Oh my goodness. He got called out recently though. I believe he's in trouble. Oh my god, guys, please help me in the comment section. What he does is he invites atheists to speak and they have a microphone and he loves to cut them off and he talks way way louder and tells them that they're wrong. In fact, he gets a lot of questions about science and he keeps saying that atheists always believe in science. This is one thing I see in the Patas groups a lot, and especially initial posts with new time members, is that they say that it takes so much belief to believe in science. Here's the thing,
Yeah.
guys. I always say this also to a bunch of friends, just to make it clear to them. You believe in your faith, you believe in your religion. I do not believe in science. I trust in the scientific method. I trust in the studies. I trust in the results and the proper documentation. I don't believe it. I trust it. They're two completely different things that have to be separated. Like,
And I'm
I can
probably
believe a basketball team is good, but when it comes to science, I trust it. I trust the process.
yes, and
I don't know if
I
that.
think I will disagree with you slightly because I think the objection is
Mhm.
not believe for me. The objection for me is believe in, as though I have some sort of religious attachment to it. So for me, there's a difference between believe
Yes,
in
yes, yes.
and believe that.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
believe
I get
in
that.
science. I believe that science is the best way to assess reality. So
Yes.
that is distinct. And so I would say I do believe science when it's believable. So, but not in
Or
all
if it's backed
cases,
up.
probably. And yeah, backed up by peer review has been
Well,
peer
because
reviewed. I don't just trust scientists by default, you
they
know.
they've
Um,
hijacked the term belief with in regards to supernatural stuff or the belief system
right.
has to have a god per se. And so a lot of theists are also surprised when it comes to Buddhism. There's no specific god. It's more of the idea. They believe in the idea of Buddhism and what it teaches and practices and all that. But when it comes to atheists, we trust it. That's why do you believe that there is no god? It's like, I don't believe that there is no god. I don't believe in your claim, and at the same time I trust the scientific process, which is trying to basically answer your questions. I trust more in science than I do
Right.
believe in it, if that makes any sense. Because
Yeah.
there
I mean,
are
well,
there are some
I don't believe
shady
in it. So
scientists. There
I
are some
believe in
shady
the
scientists who
process.
will,
That's the
if
only
you
thing
want
I
to get
believe in. I don't believe
funding.
in science. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's
And not as a
it's
fool. It's
I
like
believe
it's like
this.
science becomes our god.
Right.
I don't
I
want them to
believe in the
think that science is
process.
not our god.
I believe in the process because it's demonstrable, because it can be shown to be reliable. I don't believe
Hmm.
in science as some sort of, scientism stance where everything scientists
Yeah.
say is true and believable and accepted at face value. Like, no, that's not what I'm saying. And I've been accused of
Yeah.
that
And
too.
see, that's why, yeah, I think that's a misconception that a lot of theists believe, is that they think that we actually believe in the god of science or in scientists. We don't trust the scientists. I don't trust scientists. I trust in their work. I trust in the results, which are peer reviewed, tested, and demonstrated. There.
Yeah.
Sorry, I went off tangent there because I just remembered seeing
No.
it in a
Um,
in a thread recently, and that, oh, you atheists believe in science. Like, no, there's no altar at home with like with Apollo and like Bill Nye's photo. I don't have any of that.
so yeah, I think we're gonna wrap it up here. It's already been an hour and a half, and we don't have any
Hmm.
callers. So I usually like to reserve the last 30 minutes for like last minute talk or callers. But since we don't have any, and I think we covered everything we wanted to talk about today. Unless there's anything else you want to discuss, I think we can probably wrap this up today. And just as a reminder, before we do wrap up, that we are going to try to have special guests on the show. So if you're interested, uh, be sure to check out the uh, podcast page, we will be posting who will be coming, when they will be coming, and we will have a calendar of events for that. So that's something I'll try to make sure I update when I know when they're going to be on. So we have Dave Warnock as a potential guest on the show, who is the I think author of Dying Out Loud, or he is dying out loud. He's going to discuss death, atheism, and dying, and that kind of thing, and how we deal with death. Then we have Dr. Daryl Ray, who's going to come on and discuss mental health. I'm trying to get Shannon Q on as well to do the same thing, discuss those ideas around mental health and neuroscience. And then we also have the potential to get Matt Dillahunty on the show, who I'm trying to reach out to. And we might even have Jenna Belk on the show again. I really enjoyed her company. That was fun. So, yeah. So now we can maybe go into the wrap-ups. I think we have one last comment here that we can respond to if you'd like to. But other than that, I think it's probably time we wrap it up for today. We're getting on the last few minutes of the show here. So it's been another great week. And that flew by the way, talking about INC and all that. That was fun.
Went by really fast. But yeah. I want to remind our listeners that this is a live call show. And what we're doing is basically, that's what somebody not corrected me, but gave me the answer of when INC was formed. And it was in 1914. Thank you, Michelle. I jump in this without the use of Google or anything. This is a free-flowing show. And, we're here to make atheists not feel alone or not be shy to talk about these things because it's relevant in our lives. And more often than not, people love to debate on the page. So this is like the happy time fun hour with Ben and John. And if you're a theist, please don't be afraid of us. We do talk to theists, and we do, it's not such a technical show and to the people commenting na hindi kami nagtatagalog, hoy, marunong kami magtagalog. Pwede kami magtagalog kung gusto namin. Kung magtagalog kayo, magtatagalog din kami. But we prefer to speak English because I guess that's just easy for Ben and I.
I still need to get
in case
I was just saying I need to buy Rosetta Stone
because you don't speak English. Don't worry. Mm-hmm. Come again?
I need to buy Rosetta Stone so I can learn Tagalog.
That's why I'm here, so I can help out. And I've done it for a few callers, so don't worry, guys. Wag kayo mahiya. So I guess that does it for us this week.
Yeah. Oh, and one more quick announcement. Also, we're going to be having perhaps Eric Hernandez also on the show. I actually spoke to him about that. I forgot. How could I forget that? I just talked to him yesterday. So it was. So after we had our discussion, we talked for a while, and one of the things he said is, "Hey, don't forget, if you want to invite me to Patas Weekly one week, we can do that." So we might have him on to discuss some sort of maybe religious angle on something. But what we really wanted to talk about was this mental health thing, because he and I'm not outing him in any way. He talks about this openly. He has ADHD. I have PTSD. So we want to discuss mental health a lot more on this show too, because I think it's important that we make sure that there's that access to mental health facilities and the importance of it, and bring a community together around that. So anyway, I think that'll do it for me. Anything else, John?
Final thoughts. If you can watch Avengers and DC movies and not complain that they're speaking English, I think we're fine. I think we're fine because maraming nanonood ng Marvel at DC, and you guys don't complain and tell Batman, "Hoy, magtagalog ka, Batman." So yeah, I think we're good.
To be fair,
this Saturday.
To be fair to them, I don't come with subtitles.
July,
so. Happy 4th of July. Thanks. All right. Thanks everybody for watching, and don't forget to tune in next week. We'll be here at the same time. Bye bye.